Greetings and welcome to the broadcast. This is Prison News. I'm your host. What we're doing today is we're turning the clock back about 200 years to a little thing called McGuffey Readers. We're reading some select excerpts. These things were used not only for inmate children back around, the Civil War, but also for inmate families and also for regular schools as well. It's kind of fun to see what these classroom curriculum was like. McGuffey Readers, sample number 1 is A Walk in the Garden. Frank was one day walking with his mother when they came to a pretty garden. Frank looked in and saw that it was very clean, had gravel walks and beds of beautiful flowers, all in bloom. He called to his mother and said, "Mother, come and look at this pretty garden. I wish I might open the gate and walk in." The gardener, being near, heard what Frank said and kindly invited him and his mother to come into the garden. Frank's mother thanked the man. Turning to her son, she said, "Frank, if I take you to walk in this garden, you must take care not to meddle with anything in it." Frank walked along the neat gravel paths and looked at everything but touched nothing that he saw. He did not tread on any of the borders, and he was careful that his clothes should not brush the tops of the flowers lest he might break them. The gardener was much pleased with Frank and his mother because they were so careful they didn't do any mischief. He showed Frank the seeds and told him the name of many of the flowers of the plants. While Frank was admiring the beauty of the flowers and the seeds, a boy came to the gate, and finding it locked, he shook it hard back and forth, but it would not open. Then he said, Let me in. Will you not let me into this garden?" "No, indeed," said the gardener. "I will not let you in, I assure you, for when I let you in yesterday, you meddled with my flowers and pulled some of my rare fruit. I do not choose to let a boy into my garden who meddles with the plants." The boy looked ashamed, and when he found that the gardener would not let him in, he slowly went away with his head down. Frank saw and felt how much happier a boy may be by not meddling with what does not belong to him. He and his mother then continued their walk in the garden, enjoyed the day very much. Before they left, the gardener gave each of them some pretty flowers. Next, Harry and Annie. Harry and Annie lived a mile from town, but they went to the school almost every day. It was a pleasant walk down the lane and through the meadow by the pond. I hardly know whether they liked it better in the summer or in the winter. They used to pretend that they were travelers exploring a new country, and they would scatter leaves on the road that they could pretend that they were finding their way back again. When the ice was thick and firm, they went across the pond, but their mother did not like them to do so unless someone was with them. "Don't go across the pond today, children," she said as she kissed them and bade them goodbye one morning. "It's beginning to thaw on that ice." "All right, Mother," said Harry, not very good-naturedly, for he was very fond of running and sliding on the ice. When they came to the pond, the ice looked hard. It looked safe. "There," he said to his sister, "I knew it hadn't thawed any. Mother is always afraid we shall be drowned. Come along, we'll have a good time sliding. The school bell will not ring for another hour at least." "But you promised, Mother," said Annie. "No, I didn't. I only said all right, and it is all right. I didn't say anything." "Well, I guess I didn't say anything either, so I can do as I like too," said Annie. So they stepped on the ice and started to go across the pond. They hadn't gone far before, crack, the ice started to give way, and before they could turn back, they fell into the water. A man who was at work near the shore heard the screams of the children, screaming and plunging in and out of the water. He went over and jumped into the water and tried to save them. Harry managed somehow to get to shore without any help, but poor Annie was nearly drowned before the man could work his way over there and grab her. Harry went home almost frozen and told his mother how disobedient he had been. He remembered the lesson that day for as long as he lived, and when Dad got home, he reinforced that lesson. Next, the Widow and the Merchant. A merchant who was very fond of music was asked by a poor widow to give her some assistance. Her husband, who was a musician, had died. He left her very poor indeed. The merchant saw that the widow and her daughter, who was with her, were in very great need, really in distress. He looked with pity into their pale faces and was convinced by their conduct that their sad story was true. "How much do you want, my good woman?" said the merchant. $5 will save us," said the poor widow with some hesitation. The merchant sat down on his desk, took a piece of paper, he wrote a few lines on it. Then he gave it to the widow with the words, "Take it to the bank you see on the other side of the street." The grateful widow and her daughter, without stopping to read the note, hastened to the bank. The banker at once counted out $50 instead of 5 and passed them to the widow. She was amazed when she saw so much money. "Sir, there must be a mistake," she said. "You have given me $50 and I only asked for 5. The banker looked at the note once more and said, "The check calls for $50. "It is a mistake. Indeed it is. I know it's a mistake," said the widow. The banker then asked her to wait for a few minutes while he went over to see the merchant, who gave her the note. "Yes," said the merchant, when he had heard the banker's story, "I did make a mistake. I wrote 50 instead of 500. Here, give me that. That poor widow is going to get $500 for such honesty. In fact, $500 is a poor reward, even at that sum. What a wonderful, honest woman." Well, folks, this is just a sample of the actual reading portion of the McGuffey Readers. Now, just so you know, all those kids had during this time were pieces of slate. I mean, a piece of slate sometimes, and some chalk. No reading, writing, or pens unless you were privileged or, kind of almost an elite in some of the schools. But people were able to learn. Now, they did have some moral lessons. A lot of times the kids were told about God in these lessons. This is before what they call took prayer out of schools. And some of the prayers are kind of what you would call a middle-of-the-road prayer, asking the Lord to bless them and to kind of help them out and things like that. And there's a few times where people do have to be punished for their misdeeds. But by and large, it's really some great stories. Now, as we get ready to set up here on Spreaker, those of you who are coming over from our YouTube site, everything's going to Spreaker now. Unfortunately, there's been some, I guess you'd call it, philosophical differences with YouTube and thousands of others, what they call content creators. I'm not a content creator. I just read some things to the folks out there so we can share some information that maybe they wouldn't have time to hear about or see normally. Anyway, folks, we'll go ahead and snap off right now. I will ring the bell. This sounds like a prison bell. I'll try to make it sound just a little bit like a school bell until we get back with another conversation. Anyway, folks, don't forget your prayers. And don't you forget the part about Jesus Christ being Lord and getting born again. That stuff is very important as well. Take care. School's out.